Hi there. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast with Lisa Schlossberg. I'm your host, Lisa Schlossberg, a licensed social worker, certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. If you, like I have, struggle with your relationship with food, eating, and body image, I am here with this podcast to guide you into healing the relationship you have with yourself through a trauma-informed, holistic, and mind-body-soul approach. Together, we can support you in building a lifestyle of more peace, freedom, safety, and power. Hello again, and welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. This is your girl, Lisa Schlossberg, and we are back today for chapter 27 of the solo series. So, buckle up. I'm super hyped to be here today. There is a lot to cover, a lot to come back to, a lot to unpack. So let's do it. Before we do, I'm going to say the weekly reminders and invitations. Number one, come join me on Patreon. So that's that. Now, I want to dive in. Let's just do it. Let's just dive right in. Okay, so we are, like I said, building on the last episode. We are going to talk about fierce self-compassion in much more depth today. And to bring us into this episode, I want to come back to text from Bob. We have more text from Bob. So in our last iteration, Bob, my friend, who has been following along with the solo series, said something that I thought was very wise about taking it seriously and holding it gently. He had examples for, and he explained that when he thinks about holding a baby or a puppy, that carries the energy of take it seriously, but hold it gently. So I want to share a little bit more about what he said about that, because I think it's just so on point. So his follow-up text read, and I'm going to read these directly. It makes sense with exercise too, because I'm like you where I get a bit angry by default when it's time to get serious. So that, we brought up again weeks ago where if I tell myself to take something seriously, all of a sudden I'm holding the energy of anger. And it's like, it doesn't need to get to that level of contraction and tension in my body. I just want to focus. And that's why I thought bringing in the Bruce Lee quote about successful warriors are average men with laser-like focus is so powerful, because it's that idea, is that it's not about taking it so seriously that you're contracted and stressed and angry, but that you're taking it seriously, which means you're focusing. So makes sense with exercise, according to Bob and me. Then he says, but relax without collapsing, because that's the other thing he brought up. Relax, don't collapse. And so he said, but relax without collapsing is something I struggle with both exercise and posture. Yes. So he's talking about physically, as well as giving up on my plans to make changes or whatever. So now we're talking more emotionally, mentally. And so there's the relax without collapsing, right, that we could think about in terms of our posture and our actual body, but also our plans and our commitments, either to other people or ourselves. And we're going to say more about that. And then he said, but relax without collapsing makes total sense to me as a phrase, and I was able to practice it right away in posture and with mental stuff/tasks. So again, it's following this theme of physically and externally, but also emotionally and internally. So you can practice that focusing. You can practice the relaxing and not collapsing in both dimensions. And then he says, probably my favorite thing in this series, it helps with distinguishing between what's being kind to myself and what's bailing on myself too. And I think this sets us up for a lot of this episode as well, because what we're talking about here is really, I'm not just going to say redefining self-compassion, but it feels important to me. I really love the word reclaim it. Because if, again, there are beliefs that you holding yourself accountable, you staying committed to something is self-loathing, or is a reflection of your fear and self-hatred, I think we can reclaim that and reclaim the truth. That is, sometimes, if I'm bailing on myself and I'm bailing on the person that I want to become and I'm bailing on the goal that I set for myself, that's not loving, right? That's bailing on yourself. And so that's what we want to pay attention to here, is creating a new narrative so that we can understand how to integrate this in a way, again, that feels safe, healthy, loving, and therefore sustainable. And so I'll skip to, because he said this, I will skip to something that I wrote in my notes that was going to come way later, but it's really just, he's echoing this idea that is, sometimes we're going through discomfort. And the way that I think about it is I'm putting myself through discomfort because I know what I'm capable of. And again, it's this idea of I'm not forcing you into it because you have to do it or you should do it or I'll hate you if you don't do it. It's not that. It's I'm putting you through this discomfort because I know that you can tolerate it. I know you can do it because I believe in you. I know what you're capable of. And I'm forcing you, self, to do this thing because the only alternative is giving up on yourself. You're either going to stay committed to the goals, the values, the intentions that you have, or you're not. But again, if life is a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse, you're going to be, as we've talked about, in the discomfort of doing the thing, or you're going to be in the discomfort of not doing the thing. But the discomfort of doing the thing is you actually moving in the direction you want to move in and achieving what you want to achieve. Because the only alternative is now you're giving up on yourself and you're bailing on yourself. And so if we just see it, if we start to see it that way, again, as we introduce this into food and eating, it's really no different. Or weight loss, fat loss, it's really no different than anything else. This is you staying committed to yourself rather than giving up on or abandoning yourself. And again, your goals and values. So we could see it that way. So thank you, Bob, again, for your very valuable input. And that is it for text from Bob in this episode, but we will come back as always. Wait, no, I lied. He said one more thing, but it was in a different place. So this is the last thing. He said, this is about reparenting as both an idea and a word, but also recognizing, hear this, also recognizing it is my responsibility to take good care of myself, even if I definitely did not opt in. So that idea, okay, it's my responsibility to take good care of myself. But now I'm just going to expand on this a little bit. It's not just take good care of yourself physically, feeding yourself a certain way or moving a certain way or sleeping a certain way, hydrating a certain way. It's not just taking care of yourself physically. That's the reparenting in the physical dimension. It's also not just taking care of yourself emotionally, validating, tender self-compassion. We talked about all of that. But I also... to me, this is where if we are taking good care of ourselves physically, emotionally, but now also spiritually. So what does that mean? To me, as you've heard me say, I define spirituality as the relationship you have with yourself. But I do think it's possible, right, for you to take care of yourself physically and take care of yourself emotionally and still neglect yourself spiritually. So to me, what Bob here is talking about is that it's about reparenting and taking good care of ourselves. You could do that physically with things like food. You could do that emotionally with things like tender self-compassion and acceptance and self-compassion in that way, right? But there's also how do we reparent spiritually? How do we, I see such a theme of a few things that are coming through. How do we take care of ourselves spiritually? And to me, that is aligning with values. That is aligning with ethics. That is aligning with the higher self. That is because think about it, you could be feeding yourself all the right things, quote unquote. You could be moving your body. You could be doing all of that. And you could be practicing self-compassion. But if you're not living in alignment with your own values, to me, that is self-neglect on a spiritual level. It's not just self-neglect physically. It's not just self-neglect emotionally. Then it's being neglectful spiritually. So what Bob here is talking about is, I didn't opt into being a parent, but now that I am, and I have to take care of myself, we have to do that physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's why it goes a little bit deeper than, are you, making the behavior change and being kind to yourself? But it's more than that. Are you ultimately being the parent you want to be? Are you being the person you want to be? Because that's how we can feel fulfilled on a spiritual level. Okay. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Thank you, Bob. Now, I have a couple follow-up thoughts about the last episode, and then we'll dive dive even deeper. The first is I want to come back to this idea now following on this theme. Okay. We have the mental and emotional plane of what's going on internally. We have the physical dimension with the food and the eating and the exercise and things like that. And then we have the spiritual dimension. So what I want to go back to is your body as an instrument versus your body as an ornament. Now, this also is not my original idea or language. I'm not the first person who has ever said anything like this, but I want to kind of elaborate on it a bit and add, again, kind of infuse it with this level of, like, bringing it to the level of the spiritual. Because the way that I have typically heard it talked about in the past is that when your body, you start to see that your body is more than just an ornament to be looked at or to appear a certain way. And you think about how your body is an instrument. What are the things that your body allows you to do? And very often, this is where, we'll look at, well, I'm grateful for my legs because they allow me to walk. If you're fortunate enough to have two legs, that's one of the things it allows you to do. I'm grateful for my arms because they allow me to pick up my cat and hold my baby and things like that. I'm grateful for, my whatever. You practice gratitude for different parts of your body to see that they are instrument and to think about what is it that your body allows you to do. And I think, I covered this in the previous episode, but I want to say a tiny bit more about it. That is, I'm going, I think, kind of a level deeper than that. That is, it's not just about like your arms and your legs and your, putting your groceries away and walking through the world. And, it's not about just those things. But it's really about, like I said, your five senses and experiencing your human life. And I think very often if we leave your body as an instrument, not an ornament, conversation at just these are the things that your body allows you to do, like walking around and picking things up and putting them away, that's all a really, really great place to be reminded that your body is an instrument and that all the things that it allows you to do. But I think it still misses incorporating the idea that you're a spiritual being in having a physical experience, that you're a spiritual being in a physical manifestation. And that's what it's really here for. Like that's really the purpose of it, is not just for you to like pick things up and put them down and walk through the world, but to experience, again, love. And to me, if we're getting to the depths of it, which that's what I'm here to do, it's not just about those things that allows you to do, because those things don't necessarily capture love and your senses necessarily. And so I think if we're looking at this again as you are a spiritual being, we need to really understand that your body being an instrument is more, to me anyway, about it being your home and what it being your home allows you to do. Even if you're, like, think of it this way, even if your home never moved, right? Even if your home couldn't, walk through the streets and put your groceries away and pick up your kids and all those things. Even if your body couldn't do those things, there would still be a purpose to you living in your body, which is to feel what you feel. And I think that needs to be incorporated into this conversation beyond, again, just the physical dimension. Now we're talking about you living in a body so that you can experience your emotional reality as well. So I feel like that's important because it also reminds me of, what I've said about intuitive eating. Intuitive eating, the book, the pop culture understanding of intuitive eating, through the 10 principles that were written in that book, very often we're understanding that as listen to your body, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, quote unquote, this is intuitive eating. But to me, it still goes way deeper than that because that kind of intuitive eating, listen to your body, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, is kind of like practicing gratitude for your body, picking things up and walking around, but it's still not addressing the spiritual dimension. We're talking about intuitive eating. I'm talking about your intuition, which is actually on the spiritual dimension. So listening to your body is not just hungry and full. Listening to your body is listening to your gut, listening to your intuition, listening to your instincts, the vibes, the energy that you feel. That is the intuitive eating I'm talking about. And that's also the level at which I'm talking about your body being an instrument. This is what it allows, again, it comes back to energy and feelings and vibes and, all of that. That to me is like, I'm not saying anything really different. I'm just saying it goes deeper. It goes deeper. And again, if you are a spiritual being having a physical experience with an animal brain in a social context, surviving on food, and what you want is intentional weight loss, I think you have to know the depth to which this applies and to which this is true. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Now, my next follow-up thought is I want to talk just for a second about, I'm talking about all of this as self-love. You get to practice and exercise and express self-love to yourself, through yourself, for yourself. And I have also shared that realistically, for a lot of us, we're not starting in a very loving relationship with ourselves, or at least we're not starting that way in our relationship with ourselves around food and our bodies most of the time. If you are, that's wonderful. However, what I want to call out is that I want to not make sense of it, but it's going back to setting realistic expectations, honestly, because it can be very unrealistic to think that you're going to go from self-loathing to self-love, like off the bat. So I want to help you set realistic expectations of what this journey can feel like and look like. The first thing is, I'm going to remind you, I think, of something I said a long time ago, but I don't really believe, now I don't want to get too deep into this right now, but I really don't believe that we hate ourselves. I don't think we hate ourselves. I think it's super valid if you're mad at yourself for something, if you feel guilty about something, if you're not proud of yourself, if you feel ashamed, fine. But I genuinely do not believe that we hate ourselves. What I think self-loathing and self-hate is really fear. And I'll tell you how I get there. But again, this could be a conversation for another day. If you have follow-up questions, let me know. But when I hear, I'm not good enough, for example, I don't think that we actually believe I'm not good enough. I think what that actually is I'm scared I'm not good enough. So it's not self-loathing. It's fear disguised as self-loathing. So we think I'm not worthy, and we feel I'm not worthy. So we think we believe I'm not worthy. But I don't think we believe that. I think we were taught that and we had experiences that reinforced that. And now we're living with the fear that I'm not worthy. Okay? So that's my take. But the reason I'm saying that is because I don't think we are starting in self-loathing. I think that we're starting in what we think is self-loathing, but it's actually fear. And so how do we move from fear to love is ultimately what we're talking about. If what we want is to go from perceived self-loathing to embodied self-love, what we're really asking is how do we move from fear to love? Okay, so now if we insert this into what I've been sharing with you about thinking of it through the lens of inner child, inner parent, child-parent dynamic, well, again, it's like you may not, or I'll use myself, I may not hate or loathe the parent. However, from the child's perspective. However, if I am the child, and like I've said, in a few different examples, if I have a parent that has been absent or harmful or abusive or neglectful, I may not hate my parent. I'm scared of my parent and I don't trust my parent. But that's not the same thing as saying I hate them. That's just saying I'm scared of being around them, or I don't feel like they can take care of me. I don't trust them, right? Things like that. And I think that this is what's happening in our relationship with ourselves very often. It's not that we hate ourselves. It's that we don't feel safe with ourselves. And again, most of the time, because we were very well intentioned, we have been very harmful and neglectful and abusive toward ourselves. And so it creates a dynamic that feels like self-loathing, but it's really, it's fear. It's fear of ourselves. It's lack of trust in ourselves. And so we have to understand that our relationship with ourselves is going to also mimic and mirror our relationships with other people. Meaning, if you are in a relationship with someone where you fear them, you are scared of them, all they've ever done is harm you and hurt you and make fun of you and talk down to you, you're not going to one day all of a sudden just feel very loving toward them. And the same might be true for yourself. And so I, again, am saying over and over again that you get to practice self-love and you get to express self-love. But I can imagine, that can be really hard to do if you are still locked in the belief that you don't deserve love, that you are not worthy of love. Then it's going to, that's going to be a serious obstacle to you engaging with the behaviors that are required for intentional weight loss from a place of love, because you're not in a loving place towards yourself right now. You are in a fearful place towards yourself right now. And that is valid. Okay. So when it comes to having realistic expectations, what I want to say is very much like, if you think of, often this comes up with bodies. If I don't like what I look like, I hate my reflection, I hate my appearance, I hate what I look like. Okay, well, you're not going to go from hating what you see in the mirror to loving what you see in the mirror overnight. And that would be an unrealistic expectation. And so that's where there's really room for neutrality, body neutrality, right? Is like, instead of trying to love your body and love what you see, can you just practice being neutral toward it? So the same way that we're neutralizing foods, it's not good food and bad food. There's no such thing. You're looking in the mirror, and yeah, maybe this is the practice of radical acceptance, by the way. Go back a bunch of episodes and, unpack that if you need a reminder. But this idea of like, you don't have to like it. You don't have to love it. You don't have to be psyched about it. You just want to practice being neutral. Like, oh, okay, there's my body. All right, okay. It's not, and this is where for me, it's very valuable to say something like, I'm uncomfortable. Maybe looking at my body makes me emotionally uncomfortable, but I'm not unsafe. I can stay here with it. That's practicing neutrality. And so what I'm saying is, if you are in, I'm going to call it fear, right? It's not, I'm going to position here. It's not self-loathing, it's fear. If you are afraid of yourself because of how you have treated yourself in the past, that's valid. And so moving toward neutrality, moving toward tolerance as a middle ground, before you get to treating yourself with love or feeling worthy of love, it's just the same way you would with any other actual person. If you feel scared of them, first, it's just you're gonna like inch your way in that direction. You're gonna get closer and closer to each other. It's gonna be gradual. It's going to be, day by day. That's how trust is built, as we've talked about. And so you want to think about that. And so if you're hearing me say, treat yourself with love, and you are still in so much fear, just know that in the beginning, you might have to, think of it this way, you might have to take really, really, really small baby steps as your fierce self-compassion action item. You have to do the behavior. You have to make a change. You have to take action to alleviate your suffering. But in the beginning, if you feel, again, really scared of yourself, really unsure and untrusting of yourself, that's going to be a really baby step, something that you know that you can do, something you'll show up for, something that you can keep consistent. Because in the beginning, if you don't already have a trusting relationship, forget about intentional weight loss. Your job is to create trust so that you can engage in intentional weight loss. As you've been hearing me say in a few different ways, level 1, level 2, level 3, that's what level 1 is about establishing the relationship that you need, that level 3 is going to require. It's not about establishing the things in the physical dimension. It's about establishing the relationship that you need. And so in the beginning, you might have to take very, very small baby step action items and then counter that with, or not even counter that, I mean, accompany that with like 90% of the work is your tender self-compassion, because you haven't proven that you can be tender yet. You haven't demonstrated that you can be warm and loving yet. If you haven't done that yet, that's your primary job. That's your primary goal early on. And that's how it's going to go. And then you'll see, as you keep doing that, then things start to shift, where now you could take even bigger action item steps. And then your tender self-compassion is just so kind of locked and loaded and habitual that it doesn't require that much work, is what I'm saying. And so it's just like anything else, where you have to meet yourself where you are, right? If you don't have a safe, loving, trusting relationship with yourself, you can't bullshit that to yourself. Like you can't fake that. You can't skip that part. And so that's what you can expect it to look like, is like in the beginning, it might be very, very small changes with a lot of the inner work, but then as you go, it requires less and less of that. So you just have to know that if you're getting your feet wet with tolerating and then liking yourself on your way to loving yourself, it's not always going to be that hard. It's not always going to be that much work. And so I think what I'm trying to say to you is, if treating yourself with love feels so far outside your comfort zone, it's not always going to be. But like you've been hearing me say about anything else, you have to work your way there. You have to act your way there. In order for anything to feel safer, you have to act your way there a lot of the time. It's not just about thinking it or feeling it or saying it or manifesting it. It's like you have to actually do it. And the same is true with something like self-love. In order for self-love to feel familiar and say, how do you get anything to feel familiar? You do it over and over again until that's your zone, till it becomes your comfort zone. So ultimately, I'm saying one step at a time, meet yourself where you are, and it does get easier, like anything else. Okay. So that's my follow-up thought. Now, like I was saying in the last episode, as I live my life and my antenna are up for things that feel applicable and relevant, something came across my Instagram feed recently, 4 days ago to be exact, and I was like, oh yes, thank you, universe, for putting this in front of my face right now. So what I'm going to do is read it to you. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to unpack it. But this is, again, so Ailey Jolie, who I read a few of her posts during the internalized male gaze episodes. Ailey Jolie, who is a somatic psychologist, I still think that everything she's written that I've read is brilliant and beautiful and so powerful. And so I want you to know that that is where I'm getting this. These are not my original words. I'm going to read this Instagram post to you, and then we're going to come back and talk more about it. Okay. What she says is, the no expectations relationship isn't evolved. It's empty. Now, before I go on, I want you to think about this specifically in relation to inner child, inner parent, as we're talking about it. Okay. This can be true. Obviously, she'll give you plenty of examples of how this shows up in other relationships outside of you. But anyway, that's the lens I'm seeing it through, and we'll come back and talk about it through. The no expectations relationship isn't evolved. It's empty. Obviously, Mel Robbins didn't invent detachment, but she did give it really good marketing and viral packaging. Let them not text back. Let them forget your birthday. Let them show you who they are. Stop chasing. Stop expecting. Stop needing. Find your peace by letting go of your grip on everyone around you. As a somatic psychologist and as a human being in relationships to other humans, I understand the allure and appeal. There's something in what Mel is saying that speaks to a real exhaustion, the exhaustion of unequal kindness and care. But as a somatic psychologist, and again as a human, there has always been something that troubles me about the let them theory since I first heard it directly from a client's mouth. The uncomfortable and probably very unintended reality from Mel is that let them has become permission for something that isn't peace and is much darker instead. It's become a framework to release people before they can disappoint us. A philosophy that asks us to expect nothing so we can never be let down. And I want you to know that that's not freedom. That's a life lived in a permanent brace. The reality is that many of us have been sold a lie dressed up as liberation. The lie sounds like this. The healthiest relationships are the ones with no expectations. Real love asks for nothing. Securely attached people never have needs or make requests. Mel isn't to blame for this lie dressed up as liberation. It didn't start with let them, but the theory has become its latest vehicle. It shows up in therapy speak on Instagram, in podcasts about releasing attachment to outcomes, in the careful, boundaried language of people explaining why they can't show up for you, but want you to know they still care. I see this daily in my practice. Women who have already diagnosed themselves using vocabulary they learned from a reel. They told me that they are too much because they wanted a friend to call them back. They worry they are enmeshed because they miss someone who left. They've been taught to see their longing for a reliable connection as evidence of psychological deficiency rather than biological necessity. The language of therapy, stripped from its context and commodified for content, has become a weapon turned against the very relational needs it was meant to protect. But we are not built for this. Bowlby, who studied infants and attachment, found something simple and devastating. Infants who were fed but not held failed to thrive. Children need more than resources. They need relational presence. They need to know in their bodies that someone will come when they cry. We don't outgrow this. Adult attachment isn't childish or regressive. It's how our nervous systems are designed. We settle in the presence of people who are predictable, reliable, and attuned. We dysregulate when we are alone for too long or when our connections are chaotic and inconsistent. This is not a wound to be healed. It's a feature of being human. Women carry the lie of no expectations as some type of evolved personality in our bodies. This is because we are trained from girlhood to be low maintenance, to not ask for too much, to accommodate, flex, adjust, to be chill or polite, to be the ones who understand when someone can't show up, but to never be the ones who can't. We learn that having needs makes us difficult, that expecting things from people makes us demanding, that the cool girl, the evolved woman, the securely attached queen, is the one who holds everything loosely and never grips too tight. This is why women shrink. We make ourselves small in our own relationships, why we perform independence and call it liberation, why we let people off the hook over and over telling ourselves we're being generous when really we're terrified of being seen as too much. I know I've done all of these things, and I've witnessed countless women do the same. But while we are all doing this, our nervous systems are starving because the body doesn't lie. The body knows when it's held and when it's being dropped. The body knows when someone will come and when no one is coming. No amount of affirmations or therapy speak can trick the body into feeling safe in relationships that offer nothing solid to hold on to. This is why I want to encourage you to reclaim the truth that superficial pop psychology has obscured. Expectations are not demands. They are not control. They are not pressure. They are not the hallmark of an anxious attachment style. They are not the signs of enmeshment or codependency. Expectations are the architecture of any safe relationship. When we know someone will call us back, the body settles. When we trust that we exist in someone's mind, even when we're not in front of them, we can rest. When we expect a friend to reach out through good times and bad, we feel held in a web of care that makes the unbearable bearable again. The let them philosophy asks us to open our hands, let go, and release our grip on people. But perhaps what we actually need is to reach out those hands and find someone reaching back. Maybe the most radical thing we can do in a culture that profits from our isolation is to expect things from each other again, to need out loud, to ask and offer and show up not because it's convenient, easy, fun, or perfect, but because that's what it means to be in it together. So let them. Let them see you. Let them show up. let them reach back. This isn't about Mel. It's about what happens to a phrase once a culture that profits from our isolation gets hold of it. Let them is one way. Therapy speak on Instagram is another. The carefully boundaried language of people explaining why they can't show up is a third. The pattern is the point. Okay, so there are a few things about this that I want to unpack. The first is, obviously she's talking about Mel Robbins, the let them theory. If you're not familiar with that, it basically explains itself as this idea, let them. When you're in a relationship, someone doesn't text you back, let them. You don't have to get wrapped up in it. You don't have to get all, riled up. You just let them out there do what they're doing. And again, I think we can acknowledge there's good intention, and it has been very helpful for a lot of people, especially if you have, a lifetime of codependency and codependent tendencies in your relationships. Let them can be revolutionary and really eye-opening, but that's not what this is about. What I want to talk about here is, she's making so many really powerful, deep points, but the reason that I am reading you this here, now, today, is because the next thing that I have written in my notes before I even saw this a few days ago is what I want to talk about is how fierce self-compassion, which is taking action, is a mechanism for building and more specifically, and more importantly, rebuilding self-trust. And so if we have a perception that taking action and sometimes, forcing ourselves into discomfort is from a place of self-loathing, then we're not seeing that sometimes those exact same actions are actually the way that you rebuild trust. So as we were just talking about, if your relationship with yourself right now is such that it feels as though you are the toxic, abusive, harmful parent, then what you need to get to a place of not even self-love, but really just tolerance, and again, that kind of neutral place, what you need is to build trust. What you need, right? If there's someone that you don't trust and feel scared of, in order for you to feel safe to get close to them, that you would have to move through the process of reestablishing that this is a trustworthy person. And so I see fierce self-compassion, which is taking action, as the way to do that. That's how you rebuild trust with yourself. And so again, I'll just read to you what I have written down here, and then you can see why when I stumbled upon this on Instagram, I was like, thank you. What I had written down was, if you don't show up to do the things, then you can't trust yourself. If you do show up to do the things, you can trust yourself. So think about it, right? Again, like it's anyone else. If someone says that they're going to do things for you and then they never do, you don't trust them. And you don't trust them because they said they were going to do it. So it's not just that they didn't do it, right? It's that they said they were going to and then they didn't. So it's those two things going together, which is what fosters a lack of trust. And so if you actually say you're going to do something and then you do it, you start to trust yourself the same way that you would start to trust that person outside of you, behaving the same way. And probably overly simplified, if you don't do those things, then you can't build trust. Okay, so it's not just about do the uncomfortable things so that you can go where you want to go. It's also about do the uncomfortable things so that you can see yourself willing to show up and do it. So it's like the dual benefit, the dual feedback of if you get yourself uncomfortable, you get to achieve the thing outside of you, but then you also get to witness yourself being trustworthy, which is really what we're going for. But the point here to me is that you have to put the work in. This is another thing that won't just nothing just happens. So the same way nothing just happens in the physical dimension when it comes to weight, fat loss, it also doesn't just happen emotionally. You're not just going to start trusting yourself. You're not just going to start feeling safe with yourself. You have to put the work in. You have to make that happen. And that's why I'm saying it's not just about thinking your way there. You have to act your way there. You have to behave your way there. And the point here is it's not just emotional. it's not just you emotionally taking care of yourself. It is also meeting your physical needs. And so this is where, okay, what did I write down? Meeting your physical needs is how you build trust. If you had a parent, I love it. If you had a parent that held you when you cried, but didn't feed you when you were hungry. Okay, so we're talking about the same exact thing. If you were held emotionally, but you weren't fed, is the other thing we want to think about, right? So we have to be creating safety, and we have to demonstrate reliability and trustworthiness, both physically and emotionally. So again, we go back to, again, I just love how it's all coming together, right? Text from Bob saying, holding a baby. Take it seriously, but hold it gently. We're holding a baby. Okay. Now, what we're talking about is if you feed a baby, but never hold it, which is what Ailey's talking about with Bowlby's experiments back in the day. If you feed a baby, but don't hold it, so what you're doing is you're being trustworthy physically, but you're not being trustworthy emotionally, those babies fail to thrive. Okay? So we need to be held in addition to being fed. Okay. But now we all know that you can hold a baby. You can hold and hold and hold and hold a baby, but what will happen if you never feed it? Well, it's not going to trust that you will ever feed it, which also means that you're not a safe caregiver. Okay. So that's the idea, is we have to be looking at both of these dimensions and creating safety in both of them, because we can talk about how, like she's saying here, if you feed a baby, but you never hold it, we need relational attachment. We need relational attunement. We need connection. We need all of those things to feel safe. That's more the tender self-compassion. But what I'm saying to you is, imagine now that you are always showing up when a baby cries. You are always practicing tender self-compassion. You are always accepting your feelings, but you're never taking action. But you're never actually feeding yourself. You're equally unsafe. Okay? So that's the point here, is the fierce self-compassion is how you build trust, by actually feeding yourself, by actually taking the action, by actually doing the thing. That is how you build trust. And coming back to one of her quotes from this exact Instagram post, no amount of affirmations or therapy speak can trick the body into feeling safe in relationships that offer nothing solid to hold on to. I'm going to read that one more time. No amount of affirmations or therapy speak can trick the body into feeling safe in relationships that offer nothing solid to hold on to. So think about that again in relationship with yourself. You can be, and this is what episodes ago, when I was talking about the amount of people that I've had conversations with that are saying, I'm practicing self-compassion. I'm practicing radical acceptance. I'm being really kind to myself. When is the weight going to come off? And it's like, okay, if you're doing all of that stuff emotionally and internally, that's wonderful. But it's an unrealistic expectation that the weight is just going to come off your body if you're not taking action also. That's what I'm saying here. And now one of the last sentences that I'm going to pick out from this and talk about for a sec is, we settle in the presence of people who are predictable, reliable, and attuned. So for me, this goes back to when I talk about the division of responsibility, and you being the parent and you making decisions about when you're going to eat, what the meal times look like in terms of, structure. And I talk about the idea of having some boundaries around certain things when it comes to food in our internal family system. And the point, I'm just bringing it back to what I said a few episodes ago about how we're not talking about having structure around meal times, for example, coming from a diet culture-y, rigid, controlling place. What we're talking about is what she says here. We settle in the presence of people who are predictable, reliable, and attuned. And so we want to think about creating, for example, structured, reliable, consistent meal times and patterns around food, because that creates safety. That allows us to settle. And again, that's the point, is that it's not all just emotional attunement and presence. It's also the action. It's how that shows up in the physical dimension that will allow us to feel safe and settled in our own presence. And so part of the reason that I keep saying nothing just happens and you have to act your way there is really because I just want to remind you of the neurobiological truth that your brain learns through experience. So if your experience has been that you and the way that you've taken care of yourself are unworthy and unreliable or inconsistent or harmful and abusive and neglectful, then that's what your brain has learned. That's the experience that it has. And so that's where the belief system comes from. And the good news is, if you provide it with a different experience, it will also take that in. It will also start to shift the belief system, but it doesn't just shift the belief system and then you start behaving that way. This is the whole thing, is that very often it's like we think that we have to feel worthy of receiving love and then we will act with love. Not all the time, you know? Some of the time it's you have to just come back to the fake it till you make it, embody it until you habituate to it. You just have to do the thing. You just have to take the action and then know that it will re-establish a new belief system because of the way that you behaved. And so that's where if this is where you are and this is what you need to work on in terms of building trust and safety with yourself, your optional homework assignment for this week is, like I said earlier, to choose something that you can commit to. Choose something that you can show up for. And so, you know, for example, like I've done this with a few clients, is if you're already brushing your teeth, can you floss? Can you just like throw in floss? And from there, you know, if this is something that a habit that you want to see yourself engaging in on a regular basis, so much so that it becomes habitual, you don't even think about it, you're just someone who flosses their teeth. That's how you want to start. You want to start with a little thing, because again, when you identify a small action item that is like maybe on the border of your comfort zone, so it's not too far out there, what you're focusing on, so again, raise the level of consciousness. The same way that oceanography is not about oceanography, it's a test of my endurance. The same way that intentional weight loss is not about intentional weight loss, it's about self-love. This is the same kind of thing here, where you can choose an action item, but it's not about the action item. It's about the fact that you are choosing something that you have to show up for. So on the surface, the same way on the surface, it's oceanography. On the surface, it's intentional weight loss. And on the surface, it's your action item. It's really about much deeper than that. Oceanography is about endurance. Weight loss is about self-love. And your action item is about trust. It's about you just showing up to do the same thing over and over again. It doesn't even matter really what the thing is you just make a commitment. Start small. You have to start small if that's where your relationship with yourself is right now. If that's what it's calling for, you need to see yourself. You need to witness yourself be reliable. So it's not about, if we just use floss again as the example, it's not about the floss. It's about, can I see myself show up to do a thing reliably, consistently, predictably, over and over and over again, even when it's kind of inconvenient, even when I don't really feel like it? Can I give my brain the evidence it needs to believe that I can do this, that I show up for me, that I put me first, that I matter to me? You have to start sometimes just behaving that way so that you can start to see it and therefore believe it. That's just how the brain works sometimes. But that's why it's really important to understand that you taking action, you actually doing the thing that you sometimes don't feel like doing, is very loving and is how you start to build trust. Because what I'm seeing over and over again are people who have a very diminished relationship with themselves because of diet culture and hustle culture and burying themselves in the commitments they make to other people or their, false self or whatever it is. We have a lot of ways that we have eroded the trust with ourselves, like through following diet culture and things like that. And then we show up at a place where we feel like we don't trust ourselves, because why would we, as we've discussed in the last few episodes? But then the only belief system that we really have is that we don't trust ourselves. But if we start taking action that makes us uncomfortable, then we hate ourselves. So where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do? And what I'm saying to you is, you can look at this all as an opportunity. You can navigate through this and say, that's not true. What is true is, I am working my way toward feeling safer and more trusting and more loving of myself. And the way to do that is to take the action I need to witness myself show up. It's a completely different way of thinking through it. But this is how it works. So I guess I kind of just said the next thing that I had written in my notes was, what I said was, you think you're powerless, so you're acting like it. Like, we've talked about that, this kind of learned helplessness. We feel like we have no power. We feel like we can't control anything because, again, if you got that message through all the times that you followed a diet and then lost the weight and gained it back, and you internalize that as like all your fault and you are the problem and you are broken and you cannot make change and you can't, get yourself where you want to go and you can't and you can't and you can't. Again, you have valid reasons for that belief system being what it is, and it was reinforced over and over again. So it makes sense that you feel and think and fear. I'm not even going to say you believe you're powerless. You fear you're powerless, so you're acting like it. Okay, but then if that's the truth, then you have to fake it till you make it, until you actually see progress. And then it's a self-driving, well-oiled machine is what I wrote. So that's the thing, is like when you build this muscle and you strengthen this muscle of self-trust by doing the baby actions that your brain probably is going to inevitably judge as not good enough or not enough. That's fine. That's kind of the point. When you do that over and over and over again, then it becomes a self-driving, well-oiled machine. You just get in the habit. This is just what you do. You're so used to it. And it's not so far out of your comfort zone because you trust yourself so much. And the last thing I wrote down here was create the evidence that you have power. That's what it comes down to. Your brain has collected a lot of quote unquote evidence that you have no power. And so now what you have to do is create the evidence that you do have power. And the way that you do that, the way that you can very effectively create the evidence for you to believe, is by choosing to commit to things that you can commit to, because again, it's not about the commitment, it's about the commitment. It's not about the commitment on the surface, it's about the commitment spiritually and what that means in the relationship with yourself. So I'm going to come back to two things that were just in this Instagram post that bring it all together. One quote she said, expectations are the architecture of any safe relationship. Oh, this is so good for this. Expectations are the architecture of any safe relationship. So expecting someone to be there, expecting that someone will do the thing they said they were going to do, having expectations, and I will take it also one step further to accountability. Hey, you said you were going to do this thing. Are you going to do it? Having this relationship of expectations and accountability, to me, are, like she says, the architecture of a safe relationship. And so it's just saying, if we have the internalized belief of kind of I'll call it kind of the shadow side of the let them theory in our relationship with ourselves, let them. And that's what happens when we swing the pendulum a little too far into tenderness. It's like, let her. She doesn't feel like it. Let her. And it's like, that's not loving. That's not loving. And it's definitely not creating safety and trust. So that, and then I think one of the best quotes of this whole thing, to ask and offer and show up, not because it is convenient, easy, fun, or perfect, but because that's what it means to be in it together. To ask and offer and show up, not because it's convenient, easy, fun, or perfect, but because that's what it means to be in it together. So I know I said this a few episodes ago, Module 7, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So what she's talking about here is you're not showing up because it's convenient, easy, fun, or perfect. You're showing up because that's what it means to be in it together. And when we're in it together, parent and child, we are in it in safety. Now we can go together, which means we can go far. And if we're talking about all of this through the lens of intentional weight loss, and you are going to live in your body every day for the rest of your life, you have to prioritize going far over going fast. You have to prioritize showing up when it's not convenient, easy, fun, or perfect, because that's how you do it together. That's how you create safety and therefore sustainability. Okay, now, last couple things, all on the same topic. Here's what I wrote down, because I think I can just read it straight up. That is, we have to dismantle, unlearn, and release the system or beliefs that say trying to change is self-loathing or rejection. It is so harmful and it is so disempowering. When you believe that, you don't move. And it's kind of what I was just saying. That is, if you believe that you trying to change or make a difference in your life is self-loathing, or that it's bad, or that you shouldn't, or that you're bad if you do, then you don't move. Then you don't make the change. And that's where I keep seeing a lot of people who are very uncomfortable, is they want something to be different, but they feel like working toward making things different is bad. And so there's no movement. It's just staying stuck. It's staying stagnant in the belief system that you're doing something wrong, or you're doing something you shouldn't do if you're taking action and putting yourself through discomfort to do that. And what I'm saying here is we have to release that. We have to let that go. Because just like I said in the last episode, it's kind of like someone coming along and saying, your body actually is not intended to be, it's not, the purpose of your body isn't to look a certain way. Your purpose of your body is to be your home. And it's like, oh, okay, well maybe that changes things about how I'm in relationship with it. It's the same kind of thing here, where if we've been under this illusion that being uncomfortable for the sake of changing or taking action is self-loathing or fear, really, I'm doing the same thing by coming along and saying, actually, it's not. Actually, it can be some of the time very loving when you do that. And sometimes we just need the conscious reminder and the permission slip to know that it actually is okay. It can be, if you are doing it, again, with the intention of taking yourself where you want to go, being the person you want to be, living the life you want to live. All of that is very loving. And in the last episode, when I used examples of, studying for a test when you don't feel like it because you have an exam the next day, similar. And I'm just putting this here because, again, this shows up in so many other areas that are not food and eating. And then it seems we often have a very different relationship with it when it's about other things. And so I think about like a recovering addict going through withdrawal. And we all understand culturally, collectively, that that kind of discomfort is very loving. Like for someone to say, I'm so uncomfortable because I'm craving a drug and I'm not using it, we would support that because it's very clear that it's like, okay, this is the discomfort that you need to go through to be who you want to be and go where you want to go and have what you want to have, if that is recovery and sobriety. We support that. We know that that's part of it. But then as soon as it comes to someone changing their eating habits from a place of well-being and self-love, all of a sudden now it's diet culture. And it's like, that's what we want to pay attention to. It's like we're swinging the pendulum a little bit too far in our perception of what's happening there, because it can be very rooted in self-care, right? That it's loving. It can be. And so I know I'm a little bit beating a dead horse when I say this over and over again, but I do think that anti-diet culture, anti-diet movement has really destroyed this narrative. And I feel very passionately these days that I'm here to reclaim it. Because when I hear things like, you can't do intentional weight loss from a place of love, now my reaction to that is, no, you can't. If you are hearing intentional weight loss and self-love and you think that those two things cannot go together, that's because, again, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And if that's been your experience with intentional weight loss, then that just means that you can't do it or that you don't know how to do it. But it doesn't mean that it can't be done. I know my story. I know where I've been. I know what I've experienced. I know who I am. So I know that self-love and weight loss can be in many ways synonymous. But I'm just here to tell that story. I'm just here to offer that perspective and provide that narrative for whom it's true and for when it's true. It's not all the time, but it's not none of the time. Okay. Now, the last thing that I'm going to leave you with today is I want to share a story with you about something that happened at the Omega retreat last year. So what I want to tell you about is when we were doing, I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but what I remember is that one of the participants was saying something to me about basically the limiting beliefs, the self-critical limiting beliefs that were coming up in her head. And she was saying, like, when you say, I think we were practicing self-compassion in some degree. Everything we do is self-compassion. But we were talking about self-compassion, and what she was saying was like, what I'm hearing in my head are these voices of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, what I look like, what I weigh, my body, this, and like, I'm just in all this criticism, and I'm feeling like, there's this block to me being kind to myself because of what I'm hearing in my head. And what I said to her was, okay, imagine now for a second that you are the parent and I am the one saying these things to your inner child. So imagine now it's not coming from you. You're not the one saying or thinking or believing these things. It's coming from me, an outsider. And I'm saying these things to your inner child. I'm saying that you're ugly and you suck and you're not worthy of love. And why would I ever be nice to you when you look like that? Okay? What would you do? What would you do if I were coming along saying these things to your child? And all of a sudden, the energy in the whole room shifted because she like got up and looked at me and was like, no, you do not get to talk to my child like that. No. And it was amazing because it was the shift in real time from someone being in a position of disempowerment, victim, being bullied, to empowered, to powerful, to strong and brave and courageous. And now she was not being bullied. She was standing up to the bully. And all I had to do was externalize it. All I had to do was say, pretend it's not you saying that. Pretend it's me saying that. And then all of a sudden, she was in full mama bear energy. Fierce self-compassion energy. You don't get to talk to my child like that. No. And the reason I'm telling you this story, and I think about it so frequently, I love that I got to witness this in person and facilitate this in person, is because that's what we're going for. And if you are still under the impression that you being in that fierce, powerful, protective energy is the same as you being mean or harmful or critical or abusive or aggressive, that's not what that is. That's not what that is. Okay? And so I want to leave you with that as just an illustration of what fierce self-compassion can sometimes look like, because as we've talked about, fierce self-compassion is sometimes saying no. It's setting boundaries, right? Like that. It's also saying, yes, actually, I do need this thing. Actually, I will have X, Y, and Z. Sometimes, but the point is that you are embodying this fierce mama bear energy that is very loving. It's very loving. If someone's coming along and calling you names and being rude to you, it's loving to put your foot down and say, no, I will not tolerate this. And that's the foundation. If you go back all the way a million episodes ago, and I'm talking about the foundation of fierce self-compassion, is the Me Too movement. Is no, I will not tolerate this. You are harmful. You are abusive. You are toxic. You are hurting me. You are walking all over me, whatever it is. No, no more. That is love. That is self-love. And we just have to see it that way. Because again, If I'm going over to someone and I say, you know, how would you respond? And she says, I would say, get the fuck out of here. Who do you think you are talking to me like that? And I perceive that as like, why are you being so rude? It's like, she's not being rude. She's protecting her cub, as she should. As she should. Okay? So when you are now over this next week, as you are practicing and you're letting all this marinate, that's what I want you to think about, is that you can be very loving by employing your fierceness, by embodying your fierceness, whether it is saying no to your inner critic. And that's what I love about all this, by the way, is that now when I'll tell you this story. I didn't think I was going to, but I don't think I did actually probably at some point tell you this, but I always think about the example of when I threw the salad dressing in the trash and it spilled all over the place. And my first immediate reaction was like, you fucking idiot. Like, why would you have done it like that? And then I woke up in that moment and I caught it. And I literally had the same exact moment where I had this inner mama bear just come up and be like, no, that was me. That was rude. People make mistakes. This is a human moment. You don't come in here and telling me that you don't get to come in here and talk to me like that. I don't talk to myself that way. No. And so that's the thing, is instead of thinking about, that's the whole point here, is that it's not about externalizing it with other people. It's also when you are the one doing this to yourself. And so when you are judging yourself, when you are criticizing yourself, when you're telling yourself that nothing is ever good enough and you're so unworthy because you're so unlovable, no. You don't have to tolerate that. You don't have to believe that anymore. And again, if it's helpful, remember that I don't think anyway that you really believe that. You're just afraid of it. So you're scared. You're coming up against someone who's scared. The same way the bully. Why does a bully ever bully? Because they don't feel good about themselves. Okay? So that's what we're working with. Fierce self-compassion is loving. Structure, reliability, consistency, discipline, showing up when you don't feel like it is love. And what it all brings me back to is something I've been thinking a lot about that I brought up many weeks ago. Do no harm, take no shit. Right? That's what we're talking about here. When you refuse to take shit from other people, it doesn't mean that you're doing harm. That's what we need to pay attention to here. Okay? When you refuse to take shit from other people or take shit from yourself, it doesn't mean you're doing harm. It just means you're not taking shit anymore. And it comes back to, now I'll paraphrase, but I did bring it up at some point. The Elizabeth Gilbert quote, any meaningful transformation begins with the person in question getting sick of their own bullshit. It's very loving to call yourself out. It's very loving to say, I'm sick of your bullshit. I'm not doing this anymore. It can be very loving. And that's where accountability comes in, right? So we will continue building on this conversation to support you in feeling safe with fierce self-compassion, with the masculine energy that needs to be embedded into the process of taking action so you can get where you want to go, be who you want to be, live the life you want to live, in the body you want to have. That's really what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Yeah, I think that's it. Join me on the Patreon, and I will see you next week. I love you. Have the best week ever. Goodbye.